Good evening and welcome to this April 14, 2020, April 24th, 2023 meeting of the Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ankerman?
Here.
Trustee Hatch?
Here.
Trustee Marquis?
Here.
Trustee Rappin?
Here.
Trustee Ryder?
Here.
Trustee Charlotte?
Please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on our agenda are 4 proclamations, and the first one being a proclamation declaring May 2023 National Preservation Month in the village of Lake Bluff. Whereas the National Trust for Historic Preservation established May as Historic Preservation Month in 1973 as a way to promote historic places for the purpose of instilling national and community pride, promoting heritage tourism, and showing the social and economic benefits of historic preservation. And whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for all communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages and all walks of life. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of the history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of a heritage that has shaped our village. And whereas the Lake Bluff Historic Preservation Commission and the Lake Bluff History Museum both serve our village by protecting and preserving the beauty of our landscapes and architecture, our neighborhood character, and our civic pride in our past accomplishment. Now, therefore, I, Régis Charlot, Village President of the Village of Lake Bluff, Illinois, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2023 as National Preservation Month in the Village of Lake Bluff, and call upon the people of Lake Bluff to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing this special observation by visiting the Lake Bluff History Museum. So thank you very much for that. Next is a proclamation declaring May 2023 as National Bike Month and the week of May 15 to 21st to 21, 2023 Bike to Work Week in the village of Lake Bluff. Whereas for more than a century, the bicycle has been a utilitarian, economical, environmentally sound and effective means of personal transportation, recreation, and fitness. And whereas the education of bicyclists and motorists as to the proper and safe operation of bicycles is important to ensure the safety and comfort of all users. And whereas Illinois' Robert McClory Trail and the North Shore Bike Path attract thousands of bicyclists each year from around the greater Chicagoland area, providing economic, health, and scenic benefits to the citizens of Illinois and Lake Bluff. And whereas creating bicycle-friendly communities has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, to boost community spirit, to improve traffic safety, and to reduce pollution and congestions. And whereas the village of Lake Bluff, Illinois, recognizes the use of bicycles as a viable mode of transportation, endeavors to provide safe and responsible bicycling, and is committed to incorporating the development of bicycle facilities in the vision for Lake Bluff. And whereas the League of American Bicyclists, bicycle clubs, schools, parks and recreation departments, police departments, hospitals, companies, and civic groups through the nation will be promoting bicycling as a leisure activity as well as an environmentally friendly alternative to the automobile, during the month of May 2023. Now therefore, I, Régis Charlot, Village President of the Village of Lake Bluff, Illinois, do hereby proclaim this month of May 2023 National Bike Month and Bike Safety Month in the Village of Lake Bluff, and the week of May 15 to the 21st, 2023, as Bike to Work Week in the Village of Lake Bluff, and call upon the people of Lake Bluff to share the road safely with bicyclists and ride their bicycles to work, to the store, to the park, around their neighborhoods, and with friends and family to promote the personal and societal benefits achieved from bicycling. And I can only support that, being using bicycles myself. Next is a proclamation declaring May 2023 Mental Health Awareness Month in Lake Bluff. Whereas the Village of Lake Bluff has recognized healthy communities as a priority, and whereas there is a proven connection between mental health and physical health, and whereas Pause for Patrick organization in support of Mental Health Awareness Month will place green ribbons around trees through Lake Bluff. Whereas health promotion and service integration are reflecting in combining mental health and substance abuse service strategies. And whereas mental illnesses and substance use disorders affect almost every family in America. And whereas people with mental illnesses and substance use disorders recover if given the necessary services and support in their communities. And whereas people with mental illness and substance use disorders make important contributions to our families and our communities. And whereas only 1 out of 2 people with a serious form of mental illness or substance use disorder seeks treatment for his or her behavioral health conditions. And whereas the average delay between the onset of mental health symptoms and treatment is 11 years. And whereas stigma and fear of discrimination keep many who would benefit from mental health and substance use disorder services from seeking help. And whereas research shows that the most effective way to reduce stigma is through personal contact with someone with a behavioral health condition. And whereas both mental health and physical health are critical to the well-being of our families, communities, schools, and businesses. And whereas great public awareness about mental illnesses and substance use disorders can change negative attitudes and behaviors toward people with these conditions. Now, therefore, I, Régis Charlot, Village President of the Village of Lake Bluff, Illinois, do hereby proclaim May 2023 Mental Health Awareness Month in the Village of Lake Bluff, and call upon the people of Lake Bluff to wholeheartedly recognize the importance of mental health to our village and our nation. And last is a proclamation declaring May 13, 2023 World Migratory Bird Day. And to that, I would like to thank a couple people in the village, including Suzanne Moss and our SEC committee. Whereas migratory birds are some of the most beautiful and easily observed wildlife that share our community. And whereas Lake Bluff is part of an important migratory bird route on the Lake Michigan corridor, and whereas many citizens recognize and welcome migratory songbirds and aquatic birds are as symbolic harbingers of spring. And whereas these migrant species also play an important economic role in our village, controlling insect pests and attracting birders to visit from outside our community. And whereas migratory birds and their habitats are declining through the Americas, facing a growing number of threats on their migration routes and in both their summer and winter homes. And whereas Public awareness and concerns are crucial components of migratory bird conservation. And whereas citizens enthusiastic about birds, informed about the threat they face, and empowered to help address those threats can directly contribute to maintaining healthy bird population. And whereas since 1993 World Migratory Bird Day, formerly International Migratory Bird Day, has become a primary vehicle for focusing public attention on the nearly 350 species that travel from wintering in South and Central America, Mexico, the Caribbean, and the southern United States to nesting habitats in our community and through North America. And whereas light pollution attracts and disorients nocturnally migrating birds, making them more likely to land in areas where they are more vulnerable to collisions and other dangers. Individuals, communities, and governments, and so government are encouraged to dim the lights at night. Now therefore, be it resolved that I, Régis Charlot, Village President of the Village of Lake Bluff, Illinois, proclaim May 13, 2023 as World Migratory Bird Day and urge all citizens to celebrate this observance and to support the effort to protect and conserve migratory birds and their habitats in our village and the world at large. So thank you for that. Next is item 4, the consideration of the minutes of the April 10th, 2023 regular village board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Are there any changes?
There were 4 typos that non-substantive that I can correct, that just name switches for who made motions, as well as identifying President Pro Tem Ankerman, who was not there, pushing time as opposed to you, Mr. Charles. So it's non-substantive typos.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on these documents? So clerk, please call the roll.
Voice vote.
Voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Next is item 5, non-agenda items and visitors. The village president and board of trustees allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the village board of trustees on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the village board of trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. It seems we do not have a comment in this room. Do we have anybody online?
There is somebody online, but I suspect they're here to talk about the building code / fire sprinkler ordinance issue.
All right. Therefore, moving on.
Yep.
Next item is village board sets the order of a meeting. Item number 6, the village president and board of trustees did entertain requests from anyone present on the order of business to be conducted during this village board meeting. So given the item list, we have at least 28 items. I have noted item 21, 20, 23, 25, 24, 26 in order to be addressed next. Are there any other requests in the room? So moving on to item 21.
So without objection.
Without objections?
None.
Moving forward, thank you. Item 21.
Hi, as you know, I'm Mike Croak, Building Code Supervisor. Early last year, I started working with our Architectural Board of Review on an update to our building codes to move from the 2015 model codes published mostly by the International Code Council, some published by the National Fire Protection Association, to the 2018 edition. And there's 2 benefits in doing so. One is obviously the more current and updated content in the more recent edition of the codes. But the second reason is a chance to re-examine and reconsider our local amendments and update those as needed too. On the model code side, there's a summary of key changes in the packet. There's not really a lot that's particularly striking or notable, just a bunch of fine details that are nice to be updated. On our local amendment side, we've taken the opportunity to eliminate old local amendments that were unnecessary and stay closer to the language in the model codes. But our biggest focus has really been on the fire sprinkler local amendments. Obviously, for new construction, the model codes require fire sprinklers today, so a lot of our local amendment focus is on retrofit to existing, which is kind of a weak point of the model codes. They have language in them that really exempts a lot of buildings from the retrofit during remodelings or things like that. So the draft here that has been subject to some discussion here and a lot at the ABR makes 3 changes to our retrofit requirement. It has an exemption for open-sided structures such as the gazebo or the park districts, shelters down at the beach, which were never really intended to be covered by the retrofit requirement, but that was never completely clear in the ordinance, so now it's clear that they are exempt. Very importantly, it establishes a procedure for the buildings that are subject to the retrofit requirement, which is the multifamily and commercial buildings are subject to the requirement to retrofit by January 1st, 2026. But it establishes a procedure for them to apply for exemptions and be considered by the ABR under a certain set of criteria. And when we say exemption, that can mean extending the time period. It can mean a partial exemption where a certain part of the building is not practical to sprinkler. It can mean, various things other than a whole complete exemption. And then thirdly, in addition to having the January 1st, 2026 date for these commercial and multifamily buildings, we have added, per the suggestion coming out of discussions here, that when there is a remodel of more than 50% of a building or tenant space, even if that comes earlier than the January 1st, 2026 date, that building or tenant space has to have sprinklers added to it as part of the remodeling. And again, we're talking about commercial or multifamily buildings that are subject to the retrofit. So there had also been some discussion of whether we should eliminate an existing exemption in the code for churches from that January 1st, 2026 retrofit requirement, and that the recommendation of the ABR is to leave that exemption in place as is. So the churches, back in 2010, the code was amended when the January 1st, 2026 retrofit date was added. They were given an exemption provided they installed a full fire alarm system in their buildings, and both churches in town met that requirement, installed the full fire alarm system to qualify for that. So you have a draft in front of you that the ABR has voted 5-0 to recommend in favor of adoption, and I'm here to answer any questions you have.
I had a question about that 50% threshold from anything more than 50%, that retrofit is required. So does that mean that you're touching 50% of the spaces? Is it 50% of the value? How does that 50% threshold get calculated?
Yeah, it's calculated by floor area of rooms where drywall is being removed. So.
And that's in the code. It's written how
Right.
it's defined in the section.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Are there more questions on the board? Are there any questions in the public to Michael Croak and the Village of Lake Bluff on this subject? And if so, please come to the lectern and state your name and your address, please. If not, this is a voice vote.
First
We
reading.
have a motion?
There was a public comment, I think I handed out to the board in advance of the meeting. There was a kind of, Mr. Anderson had talked about
Yes.
those residential projects. And Mike, I don't know if you can come back up really quick. I think this is an issue that was brought up in the past by Mr. Anderson and Brad and Brady Anderson, I believe, regarding their properties that were at 15 through 17 East North Avenue, consisting of 2 3-unit buildings that were built. The codes, and do you know the issue? I don't know if you saw this.
No, I didn't see the comment.
The issue is, why would they be included in this versus, it's the same, they brought it up.
Right, yeah, right. So, right, that is something we brought up before, they brought up before. You know, multifamily buildings were included in the January 1st, 2026 retrofit. You know, really for safety, obviously. And, you know, that's something that, you know, the village and the fire department and the ABR, you know, really believed in through our discussions on this code. You know, this,
These are residential structures.
yeah, multifamily residential structures, right, yep.
How is that defined? Multifamily?
It is, well, it is the existing, it is
More units, right?
Three.
three or more, yeah, three or more, yeah.
And is that our definition, or is that a definition that comes from someplace else?
Well, that is a pretty common standard in the industry. The International Residential Code is 1 and 2 family dwellings, so it's consistent with the model codes that just, you know, separate 1 and 2 units into the residential code and more units into the International Building Code.
Mike, could they potentially ask for an exemption?
They
something like
could.
this? So they could basically take this letter where they've spelled out these different things and come in front of it would be the ABR and the village board, correct?
It is just the ABR. Well, the ABR has the final decision, and then if people feel aggrieved by that decision, they can appeal the decision to the village board. But yes, they could apply for an exemption. I haven't really looked into, you know, how closely they would likely meet the criteria, but they can certainly apply. Yep,
So they do have an avenue.
that's right, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The exemption process that we're spelling out here is an important addition to this, as is the 50% requirement. My time machine were in working order, I would go back and put the 50% requirement in a long time ago, in 2010. But I wanted to point out that the reason for the exemption for the churches to remain where it is to hold essentially the status quo, because they have already been through the exemption process. Essentially, we put in, without referencing the exemption process, we put in fact, an exemption process for the churches, and rather than rewrite the statute or the ordinance to reference that as part of the exemption process, we're going to leave the language as it stands. But I understand, Peter, that you had one addition to the recitals that would help explain that process.
Yeah, I just think we should add in the recitals where it currently says, have evaluated the impact of the adoption of the codes and the local amendments thereto on various classes of properties within the village. I think we should add to that pretty much exactly what you said, that with regard to churches, the exemption they already meet the exemption process because it already went through a process.
Yes.
So it's not that, and I'll write this more artfully, but it's not that we're just excluding them from the requirements arbitrarily. We're excluding them from the requirements because it's already been determined that they satisfy the requirements for the exemption. So we just want to be explicit about that.
Okay, thanks.
And so I'll make that change in between first and second reading.
And the second item I wanted to point out is that even if a building is determined to be exempt, if it later goes through a 50% change in, meets the 50% standard, that exemption wouldn't exempt them from doing the sprinklers at that time. It exempts them from the retrofit, essentially, but they wouldn't be, if they tore out 50% of their drywall, able to say, oh, no, I'm exempt, right?
Correct. I mean, the way I interpret it is that provision says, notwithstanding anything in this chapter to the contrary or in the code, whenever they do more than 50%, they're required to retrofit. So
Okay.
I don't think they could then say, well, we don't have to do the retrofit because we're going to apply for an exemption.
Right, nor could they use the fact that they got the exemption as a reason not to do
Correct. Correct.
the remodel process.
Yep.
So all of that is to clean up sort of the language as it existed as of 2010, to make clear that the exemption requirements have already been met by the two churches, that we're not going to put them through the exemption process again, but that's the basis for the determination. Did I have that right? Okay.
So, Peter, I would think that wouldn't it depend on if they had specifically requested an exemption from that provision, the 50% remodel? Couldn't that be granted if it was specifically requested and granted by the ABR under this text?
Well, the way, excuse me, the way I read it now is it says notwithstanding anything in this chapter which would include the exemption provisions. So
they wouldn't automatically be exempt, but they could request an exemption.
well, that's a question. So let's talk about that. I would read that as they weren't even allowed to ask for an exemption. But if you want somebody who's not previously exempt, right, and now they're doing 50%, so it would trigger it, do you want them to be allowed to ask for an exemption? It seems like, Mike, you assumed that they would be able to request an exemption.
Right. I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so we just need to clean up that language just so it's not ambiguous.
Okay.
And
But to your point, if they're already exempt and they do the 50%, that exemption doesn't carry over and automatically allow
Right.
them to do the 50% and have the exemption automatically applied. They'd have to apply for the exemption to get it.
Right. And that's what makes sense to me, and wanted to make
Right,
sure
we'll
that
make
the
that clear.
language was clear.
Yep.
So Peter, you're saying no matter what, if you're remodeling at 50% and you want an exemption, no matter if you've had one before or you haven't had one, you have to go in front and ask for an exemption. That's what I'm hearing you
That's
say.
the way it's gonna be
Okay.
written. Yep.
Right. Yep.
That's right.
Okay. I don't think that we got a motion on this item.
Make a motion to approve.
First motion. Can I please have a second motion?
second,
Thank you. Do we have more comments on the board?
From the audience, probably.
Yes. Do we have any comments from the public? And if so, please come to the lectern and state your name and address. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nick Standiford. I'm at 358 South Basswood in Lake Forest. I guess just wanted to get some clarification. So the 50% rule, you can, if you're applying for an exemption for the ABR, you can also request that the 50% rule also be continued as an exemption. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not sure I understood. Say that
Yeah,
again.
so the 50% rule, when we were at the ABR, it was explained that the 50% rule was for the kind of the lead up until the 2026 date, and that was going to be in place. But from what I'm hearing is that it's going to apply to everybody. Anyone who has a retrofit going forward, anytime you do 50% of the work, work on 50% of the space, that's going to be required regardless of whether you have an exemption or that you're not even able to ask for an exemption for that.
No, it's the former. It applies regardless of whether you have an exemption. You will be allowed to seek an exemption.
So at
it
the
applies regardless of whether you have an exemption or not.
I got it. So at the ABR, we'll be able to, if we represent a commercial space, for example, we can ask for that 50% rule not to apply going forward. That if we renovate 50% of our space or a tenant space, or change the walls, I think it's as it's written, then that could be applied for through the ABR and approved as part of the exemption.
The 50% rule would apply, and then you'd seek, because the 50% rule requires the retrofit. You'd be once you trigger the 50%, you'd have to get an exemption not to be required to do the retrofit.
Okay.
But we're not waiving the 50%. The 50% is the gatekeeper. That's the trigger.
So that's always going to be in place for after someone, like, let's say I ask for an exemption from the
Yes.
I asked for an exemption from the sprinkler requirement, satisfying the criteria set forth. That 50% rule is always going to be in place, though. Is that what the board is
Correct.
saying? That anytime
Correct.
50% of the work is done, that's going to trigger the retrofit requirement? And you
Correct.
can't ask for that to be exempted.
Correct.
Wait,
You cannot ask for the 50% trigger to be
You
exempt.
can't ask for, yeah.
The
That's
50% is
that's-
in the code. It's not a zoning code, so there's no variation, there's no procedure for a variation. So if you're exempt now
Yeah.
and you are gonna remodel by more than 50%, you have to get an exemption from what happens when you
At the
do
risk of
50%.
confusing things, let me give an example of what I was trying to raise. So if somebody goes in and says, I will not be able to meet the January 1, 2026 deadline, can I have an exemption? And we say, you've proven to our satisfaction that an exemption should be granted. We're in 2025, let's say. 2027, that same entity comes back and says, oh, I'd like a building permit. I'm going to rip out 50% of my drywall. We would then say, yes, you got an exemption from the retrofit, January 1, but now we need to consider whether or not you meet the standards given this 50% change.
Yeah,
Does
that's
that-
kind of what I was thinking might happen, is you'd have to go before the ABR twice
Yes.
potentially. But what the village attorney, I think, is saying is that
That's
you
exactly
can't
what I'm
ask for that 50% a second time.
I think we're getting into semantics. What Trustee Ryder said is correct. You'd have to come in and get an exemption from the retrofit requirement that was triggered by your 50% renovation.
Okay,
That's different from saying you're getting an exemption from the 50% requirement.
so there would be, go ahead, I'm
Because
sorry.
the 50% requirement is the trigger that says, okay, I'm doing 50%. Doesn't matter that I'm already exempt. 50% triggers the requirement. I can get exempted from that, but I got to get exempted from
So
that.
there's essentially two triggers. There's the 2026 trigger, where everyone's got to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the 50% trigger, and if you hit that, you got to get an exemption,
Or do the work.
or do the work. Correct. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay,
Sounds right.
Yes, that was the intent.
okay. Just want to be clear on the process, so we know what we're doing when it comes
Yeah.
into law.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Do we have more comments in the room before we consider online requests? Who do we have online?
If there's a request from somebody participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. You'll be recognized and permitted to speak. Nope.
Nope.
Yep, yes, stand by.
Hello? Hello?
Hey, Ted. You're being heard.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Ted Brown, I am just wanting to give some input. What is being discussed here, in my understanding, is contrary to what was discussed at the ABR when Nick raised the question on this, and that the language in an exemption can cover, yes, you need to do 50%. The language in the exemption can put all kinds of constrictions on the exemption, not necessitating the 50%, because there's a lot of things that go into the exemption that would need to be considered as part of the 50%. So this is different, and maybe Nick can address this too, because this was brought up at the last ABR meeting. That concludes my comments.
I do not understand.
I suspect perhaps one solution is that when granting the exemption to the January 1, 2026 requirement, the ABR could at that point make clear that the standards, the requirements, the conditions on the granting of it is that if they do 50% remodel in the future, they will need to reconsider. I think that's consistent with what Mr. Brown was just saying, that the conditions are such that you could build that in. I don't know that we need
That's
to.
exactly correct. That's
Okay.
exactly correct. That the exemption can include the 50%, for it to automatically include that precludes all of the conditions being considered that the exemption was granted for. So I have no issue with the 50%, but having it being automatic and not a condition of the exemption is a completely different thing than what was discussed at the ABR meeting.
Wouldn't it be true that the conditions that satisfied the exemption at the first point in time would continue to exist when the 50% trigger happened? And so that could be presented as part of your appeal?
Absolutely.
So I think the important thing is that people have an avenue to appeal and to bring it forth and describe why they believe they deserve an exemption. It does not guarantee that the conditions are met and it merits that, but everyone is guaranteed that ability to appeal and to ask for it.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I have no issue with as a condition to invoke that, but a lot of the exemption, there are conditions that might preclude that for certain circumstances. So once the exemption is granted, there can be placed on that all kinds of conditions, and 50% being part of that. But to make that a blanket condition that does not take into consideration all the criteria in which the exemption was previously granted, I think is a mistake.
I think what I believe is true is that those exact same conditions will be considered. The default is come before us and explain it and present it and appeal and ask. It's not that those don't exist and you can't use them, you use them once they're used up. It's that the trigger says you must now come before us and, lay it all out, and we'll consider.
So if I understand that would put on the table the opportunity for a second exemption. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, multiple.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's the term exemption that was troubling me, because that makes it sound like it's forever and ever more exempt from the statute. And this 50% rule is key. We have got to get that into our code. That's crazy that we haven't had it in our code for the last 12 years or more. So
yeah, the exemption, there's not the idea that it would be in force forever, but the exemption would be given with some criteria that would eventually thread in the sprinkler ordinance, be that a time constraint, a change of use constraint, a remodeling constraint, change of ownership constraint. There's a lot of things that can be put in an exemption. But my thinking was to make it a blanket 50%. It's like, okay, if you can do the exemption again, I guess you just go through the drill again. But it would seem reasonable to have the exemption granted with all the criteria attached to that, because boards change, things change, versus keeping this in flux and have this level of uncertainty as you go down the road.
I'm just going to state, my opinion is that if somebody goes in and gets an exemption on 1/1/26, or I don't know if it's the end of 26, that whenever the 50% comes in, there can be a second exemption. And as the attorney said, yes, it's a two-stop, it's two exemptions, one for the 26 date and one if you ever do 50%. So it's two stops.
But it's an application process. It's not a rubber stamp. It's an application process.
Right.
It's a thoughtful review.
I think the way you stated it makes sense.
So we're providing a consistent process of FAIR that can be repeated so that people can get multiple exemptions that might follow the same process at different points in time with a stable rule for for this process to be applied, 50% or 2026. Okay? That's
What the
what's
overhead policy objective is to get sprinklers in buildings.
correct.
Yes, right.
Correct.
Thank you for restating that goal.
If there are no more questions on the board and the public, we will move forward toward a vote, and that would be a voice vote, correct? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So this ordinance passes. Thank you very much.
First reading.
And this is the first reading.
First reading.
All those people were here for that, and they didn't talk.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
They were all in favor.
Yes.
A mess.
Oh,
I know.
Because they couldn't retrofit.
got it.
Bye. Bye. Good night.
Yeah.
One more. Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Nick.
Next item on our reorder of a meeting is item 20. That would be an ordinance amending Title 3 of the Village of Lake Bluff Municipal Code concerning delivery of liquor and the number of class 5 or V, sorry about that. Being French, what do you want? Liquor, because we use Roman numerals there. So Class V liquor licenses, and specifically for Donati's Pizza, and Jeff Urso here present. Could I please have a motion for this item?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Donati's Pizza in Lake Bluff currently holds Class S and Class X liquor licenses. In March, Donati's Pizza owner-operator Jeff Urso communicated to the village that he wanted to maintain a Class X but switch back to a Class V liquor license, which Donati's Pizza previously held, to accommodate elevated service level changes to the restaurant located in the Carriage Way Shopping Center, including adding wait staff and a full bar. The modified floor plan attached would be similar to Mr. Urso's new restaurant in Lake Forest, the First Pub, which will accommodate larger parties such as families and sport teams. As you will recall, the Class V license authorizes the retail sale and service by restaurants of alcoholic liquor for consumption on the premises by the customers of a restaurant as follows. Number one, in a restaurant dining area, provided that the sale is incidental and complementary to the sale and service of a complete meal, served and eaten at a table within the restaurants. And two, in one bar service area, with or without the sale and service of a meal, provided that one, the square footage of a bar service area shall not exceed 10% of the total square footage of a restaurant to which it is accessory, and two, the only public access to the bar service area is through the restaurants to which it is accessory, and number three, in outdoor service area, provided that the sale is incidental and complementary to the sale and service of a complete meal, served and eaten at a table in an outdoor service area approved of by the village and accessory to the restaurant. The village board discussed this application in its April 10th, 2023 meeting and requested more details regarding the proposed changes. Since that time, Mr. Urso has provided a floor plan and is requesting waiver of second reading to meet operational needs. He will also be present at the meeting on Monday. And again, the conversation was flow of customers, especially children for the ice cream area of the bar, of the restaurant, away from where liquor would be served. That was our conversation the last time.
Thank you. Yeah, so our goal is to create a space for teams and families in West Lake Bluff. Right now in the village, there is, in my opinion, nowhere to bring a baseball team after a game. Silo and Pucks satisfies that need. Chiefs and Duffers does as well in Lake Forest. I think this would be a great way to to move forward in Lake Bluff. The pizza industry has totally changed since post-COVID. 10 years ago, you had two choices for delivery. You had pizza or Chinese food typically. Now with DoorDash, Uber Eats, and everything else, you can get any restaurant anytime. So this has totally changed the dynamic of our vision from 10 years ago. So now we're more experience driven. So we want to be able to attract families and capture not only kids and teens, but parents as well. And having a beverage area for adults is part of that strategy. So we'll have additional seats outside. Right now we have approximately about 80 seats outside. We just remodeled the courtyard last year, so there's a large space out there. As you can see, we have 4 doors. 3 of them are typically operational, so people do not have to walk past the bar if they so do not want to. But it'll have a similar feel if anyone's been to Duffers or even Chiefs, where it's part of a restaurant, but it's not the focus. So, and in Duffers and Lake Forest, there's a separate door as well for Susie Swirl and carry out. So we would kind of take the same strategy. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions on the board?
Did I misunderstand? Is there a Susie Swirl in Duffers?
Yes, there is.
Oh.
Yeah, so we have Hefe's Tacos, Susie Swirl, and Duffers. It's a multi-restaurant way, so we have different carryouts and different crowds coming in for different reasons, but it's a shared kitchen. That's another thing with commercial space, especially as you know, building codes are changing. The commercial space gets pretty expensive, so it's a different way to capture other revenue streams, is having multiple businesses in one space.
There, on this map, I can't picture where the checkout is.
So you'll see the word takeout
Okay.
right there by the door 3.
Okay.
So that will
Okay.
be, pickups, and that'll also be Susie Swirl payment. So the dining room and the bar will kind of be over to the side. So if someone's going to go to there, they'd probably go to that door 2, go into the restaurant, and door 3 would probably be carry out in Susie's.
And to be clear, Jeff, where the dining room is and the bar, is there going to be any kind of partition? Sometimes there's partial partitions, like maybe shoulder high or hip high. Is that part of this plan, or no? It's just showing, you're like in the dining room is showing that that's a different, maybe floor treatment or something. I don't know, or if it's all the same.
No, we've got a consistent floor throughout for customers. The kitchen has a different floor, but the opening into the different spaces is 5 feet. So, because these all were at one time separate units, and now it's, 15, 20 years ago it was medical and Starbucks. So, there's different access points, if you will, but it all flow up front. So, after you leave the bar dining area, you'll see those tables where it says, those 3 words that say tables. That's a party room. That's where people, typically, will seat a party of 20, et cetera. And then the last space goes into Susie's and takeout.
Can I ask just a really quick question? So the orange box there that says Susie's and Quick Dining, are there going to be tables in there? Is that space there for kids to sit down?
That's exactly right.
That's kind of what that is right
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
So that would be like seat yourself. You
Right,
get
so
your
if-
ice cream, and then if you wanted to sit there, but it's separate from the other space.
Exactly.
I like that. That's a
Yeah,
nice
so
layout.
if you just come in and want an ice cream, or if you want an Italian beef, you're on lunch for 10 minutes, you could go there.
Okay. And I'm assuming the door to the far left, the door on the far west edge there, by the dining room, that door doesn't open, right? People aren't going to walk into the dining
Right.
room. So it would be the
So-
other 3 doors that open?
Probably weather dependent. So in the summer, we typically open all the doors and stuff so people could flow in and out. But, the winter, no one uses that door.
Okay.
Is there any signage or anything to make it obvious that Susie's is kind of on the east end? Like
Yeah,
from when you're walking, so the kids aren't constantly walking in by the bar?
Sure, yeah, no, that's a great question. So in addition to a lighted sign that's currently there, that's right above that area, so they have a track sign up there. Our plan is to, when you look into the windows, you'll completely see. So it lights up. They have a big Susie's thing inside and everything. So it'll, the first 6 months, it'll probably be, we'll have a A-frame sign with an arrow, stuff like that, and we usually keep people outside. But it's just like any other time we've changed anything like we've done in Lake Forest. after a few weeks, then a month, then eventually it's once a year someone goes to the wrong door. But, you know, it just kind of works itself out pretty quickly.
Cool. Nice. Are there more questions?
Thank you for the drawing.
Yeah, yeah, of
Really
course.
helpful.
I did that on Pages. I'm pretty impressed with this up.
Thank you for humoring us. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Is it a voice vote or?
First reading, voice vote.
Voice vote.
But
It is
we're
a
doing-
voice vote.
He's asked that we do second as well,
You
waiving
have to,
first.
yeah, you do the first reading, and then you can
I see.
consider it to waive second reading.
I see.
And the reason is our state liquor license expires on April 30th, and we cannot get a state liquor license without the village license. That's why we asked for a waive of the second reading. Thank you.
So our first vote is a voice vote, first reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So this ordinance passes first reading.
So now you're looking for a motion to waive second reading.
Could I please have a motion to waive a second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Second, thank you very much. It's a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Can I just ask one question? I wasn't here at the last meeting when the discussion came up and we want to see pictures and, you know, so the public did have an opportunity to hear what was happening and, you know, see that the next meeting. And did we hear anything from the public in terms of emails or, you know, phone calls or comments regarding this?
No.
Okay, just wanted to be clear since we're doing the, you know, waive of second reading, because I want the public to have that opportunity, and I'm not super excited usually about waiving, but there's a very good reason for doing that, and it's kind of because we asked it to be held off for another meeting, so.
We had a fairly long conversation on this item 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we would have had the opportunity to get public comments in between.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Yankman.
Aye.
Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Trustee Marquis.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
And Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jeff, good luck. Next item is item number 23. And that would be a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Tesca Associates for the comprehensive land use plan update. Could I please have a motion on that?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Late last year, the village initiated a procurement process to retain a planning consultant to update the village's existing 1997 comprehensive plan with a new document and framework that guides future development and land use decisions for the village of Lake Bluff for the next 20 years. As noted in the call for proposals, the new plan is anticipated to provide an overarching framework and prioritize elements from the numerous sub-area and topical plans created by the village since the 1997 comprehensive plan. 4 proposals were submitted by the January deadline, plus 1 alternative non-conforming proposal, and a consultant selection team was assembled, which included PCCBA Chair Gary Peters, PCCBA member Ann Sorensen, BAC member and local architect developer Rob Douglas, School District 65 board member and historical preservation architect Tim Penish, Assistant Village Attorney Ben Schuster, Administrative Intern Eric Mueller, and Village Administrator Drew Irvin. After evaluating the proposals and interviewing the top 3 firms, it was a consensus of the team that Tesca Associates stood out as the most qualified firm in how their proposal, interview, and references demonstrated 1, their clear understanding of the work to be performed, 2, high-quality work of a similar nature, 3, strong technical skills, and 4, clear satisfaction of clients, 5, familiarity with Lake Bluff, and 6, efficient cost approach to complete the scope of work. The attached agreement provides for the desired updates of a plan along with numerous opportunities for public involvement over the next 15 months. And again, it names public involvement over the next 15 months, repeated. Questions to the board?
If I may just really quickly, Mike, if you want to call, Michael Blue here is the village's consultant. Most of you recognize him. He helped the village update its planned residential development code. This is from a staff's perspective, this is something that we've talked about, we've actually tried to accomplish in-house unsuccessfully several years ago. It's just a capacity issue, and the village finally included this in the budget. It's time. 1997 was the last update. The village has done multiple amendments to the plan, but it is fractured, and it's the village has, as Jeff Urso talked about, there's been lots of changes in the world, right? We've dealt with COVID. The village has learned even how a 2000 update to its village's streetscape plan and its approach to how we manage in public spaces to interface with the public. We've learned it needs to be different. So the world has changed a lot. Talked about like ghost kitchens or just shared kitchens. There's so many changes that are happening that it's time to really update our plans so that the village's long-range land use blueprint matches its expectations and goals. And the village hasn't done this since it's updated its strategic plan, and had that twice now since then. And there's been a call, which is the next item related to this, about having more diversified housing in town. But this is, right now, TESCA, the village has looked at TESCA for their planning skills to help us over the years. And again, the group viewed them as with the right skill set and the ability to really tie all these ideas, plans, and visions together. So I know Mike's here. If there's questions for him, he's happy to answer them. I'm certainly happy to represent any comments you have questions about the selection team's thought process.
I mean, since you're here, Mike, it would be great if you could, not in great detail, but just talk in very broad strokes about the phases and the community input during those phases.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to continue working with Lake Bluff. We're very excited about it. There you go. Okay, Drew. The first phase is kind of a due process, or a due diligence kind of phase, right? What's on the ground? What is here now? And we look at it from the context of the comprehensive plan, and you see the ideas there. But it's, as Drew mentioned, it has to do with land use. It has to do with what are the market conditions. It has to do with environmental issues, land use and zoning. And if Drew keeps scrolling, you'll see the rest of it. So thank you for that. And community facilities. And this is something that we do as part of every plan. You've got to figure out where you are. A big part of this one will be community character, which is to understand what's important. We kind of did that when we did the RPD. The second phase is the one I'd like to touch on most, is the one about the community engagement. It's not the second phase in that it's the second thing we do and that's it. It's important to note that the community outreach, community engagement goes on throughout the entire process. We never stop hearing what people have to say and incorporating it into what we do. The heart of it is really about the fact that different people engage differently. Not everybody likes standing at this podium and presenting to you. Some people like to, and some people don't have time, right? Some people have got the kids to deal with. They don't have time to come to meetings. And so the website and social media is a way to involve people that way. The other thing that was up there real briefly was the idea of doing key person interviews and learning about the community from its residents, its customers, its involved folks. We do some surveying. The surveying is not highly scientific, but it's all informational. And I like to describe this as making stew. It's all information that goes in. We'll do a couple of community workshops. One at the beginning of the process to invite people to share their ideas about the town generally. We don't let ourselves be influenced by the fact that we know the village well. We have been working here. We want to hear with fresh ears what people have to say. And so that's what that open house and the website and all those things are about, understanding that people like to engage differently. This third phase here is about taking everything we've learned kind of on the ground, that due diligence work, and that community engagement, and start to turn that into goals and objectives. And your current plan has got a whole bunch of goals and objectives. Will probably be in very similar themes, but as Drew was saying, the world's different, and it's time to update those. And so that becomes the initial policy setting. After that, after we have a direction set, we'll start to look at these focus areas. And again, we don't know what these are going to be exactly yet. We don't presuppose this. The plan kind of drives where this goes. But in general, there are issues of land use and economic development. I mean, they're going on right now at 176, right? There will be issues of community character. Housing will fit into that, and I know there's a housing element that you're going to talk about. Natural resources will also be important because that's an important part of the village, and we're joined by Hay Associates in the project, who we're very excited to work with again. So once we do that, we'll have preliminary recommendations that we'll bring to the steering committee, and what that'll be, we can certainly discuss.
And just to be, right now, it's been preconceived, and we talked about this when this RP was, I shared it with the board, the idea that the village's Plan Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals would be that steering committee, just they have been. That's really what the Plan Commission element of the PCZBA does, is these long-range planning processes and deliverables. So that's the group that has been talked about. And you had mentioned to me the idea, maybe there's an idea for maybe a board liaison. Member Rappin asked about that, so.
Michael, I have a question for you. We got communication from residents that are afraid that their voice will not be heard enough or loud enough, basically. And so you say that the second phase would be the community outreach, and where you are going to conduct a workshop. You said that. How many outreach will you conduct? How many opportunities for residents to voice their opinion will there be?
So there will be 2 of these open house community workshops.
Okay.
These are, we advertise them, work with you to advertise. So there'll be 2 opportunities to come, and whether we do it here or somewhere else, to come and talk with. We always invite the steering committee or PCZBA and have them come. One at the beginning, one as we start to draft some ideas. So those are the 2 big events, if you will. The other thing that we do is we're going to do, I think there's 2 listed in here, we call them pop-up events. And Jody Mariano from our office has been doing these as part of the design work she's done, which is to show up where people are already showing up, right?
Farmers market.
I was going to say the farmers market is kind of a gimme, right? I have been to Saturday morning soccer games, or where the fields are full of kids playing soccer and the parents are bored and they want to talk to you. I've been to concerts. So we go where people are. We'll do a couple of those. That'll be another opportunity. The website is sort of the constant opportunity to share ideas. We're always checking it. We're always reading it. Every time somebody reads a comment, I get it by email, right? So if anybody wants to share, that's ongoing. The surveys that we do are not really long, involved, kind of multi-page things, but they're quick pop-up kind of surveys with questions on issues that are important. So we may do one about urban design or community character. So that'll be an opportunity. And like I said, the website is open till the very end of the process to allow people that kind of access.
And so if you had significant comment to address during any one of these events, you might be able to lengthen that review, correct?
Right. Everything that gets done as part of the process is on the website for people to look at. So there's a constant opportunity for feedback.
Thank you.
And how are you advertising the website? Like, how are you advertising the websites and the community workshops? Are those postcards, or how are you driving people to know that those things are out there?
Great question. It's different in every community, because what we do is we do what works. So for instance, we learned a long time ago not to bother starting a Facebook page or an Instagram account, because by the time you develop a following, you're done. Yeah. Right? So what we do is, to the extent there is a Facebook page either from the community or from a local organization, I'm working with one town now doing a comprehensive plan where the mayor is the Facebook page. And when we want attention, we post stuff with the mayor and we get feedback. Village newsletters are really good. Electronic newsletters that come out, kind of weekly or biweekly in some community. We have printed and typically print these little cards that say, hey, come to the website, come to the event. We put them in the businesses, we put them in the library, we put them around. But mostly it's about what works in town. Some places it's still a good old-fashioned water bill with a little note printed at the bottom. So we call it the toolbox. And what we do is we work with what has worked for you in the past. And we'll try something else
And
too.
we, you know, we're small enough, we do so much cross-promotion with all the other public agencies between the schools, the high school, the LBES, and others that we can, omni-channel, we can get it all out there.
So last time we did this was 25 years ago. You work with a lot of communities. How often do they normally update their plans? What's the kind of range or best practice?
It's all over the place. Depending on what you read, people tell you 10 years or 15 years or 5. There really is no right answer. What I usually tell people is when the town has changed or the world has changed, it's time to update a plan, right? So we saw a lot of communities update plans after the 2008 economy completely changed, right? COVID has certainly changed the way we all live. And so that's really more my take on it. If it's no longer meeting your needs, that's when you change it. And I generally recommend that you pick it up every year. Maybe it's budget time, maybe it's some other time, and you look through the goals and objectives and the projects that are listed in there. And if you're looking at it one year and you kind of think, well, this doesn't really jibe with where we're going anymore, it's exactly what Drew described, then it's time to update it.
What is the timing for these various outreach? If we were to approve imminently, when would we be seeing this kind of outreach?
The first thing we generally do within a few weeks of starting up is the website. So we would certainly do that. The other thing that we like to do early, and it's kind of the season to do it, is to do one of the pop-up events because it's summer. So we could
People are out.
We go to a farmer's market, or if there's something that's going on through schools or a church or parks or something like that, we could do that. So the first thing would be the website. Next thing would be the pop-up. I'd like to do those over the course of the next month or so, or a little more. The open house kind of waits for us to get some more of the base information done, and then it depends. So, in fact, I just was talking to a client today about whether or not we should bother doing an open house over the summer because people leave town, right? And so we could look to do the open house kind of before everything ends, and maybe it's sort of, I don't know, late June. Again, it depends on the community. If the community empties out June and July, or July and August, then we would probably wait and do it in September. But I think we could do that first open house before things start to empty out.
This, maybe I missed it before, but this is what I wanted, is this just general timeline.
Yeah.
So we'd have a new comprehensive plan in place in 2025, January 1, 2025, that's sort of the goal.
June of 24.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's
24.
July.
Probably the middle of next year.
I don't know, I can't read, I guess. Yes, July. I thought there were 12 boxes in 2024. No, July, so middle of
Did I
next
get the
year.
months wrong, Jen?
No,
it's
no,
okay.
you didn't. Just can't read. So fall of 20.
Next summer.
Fall of 2024, yeah, summer, okay. Yeah, it strikes me that just having anything that's supposed to be a plan that has last millennia on it probably isn't much of a plan. So, although there's so many unknowns in any kind of strategic plan, you know, you can't know when the next, pandemic is coming. You can't know what's around the corner, but you have to have some planning, and we can't wait for something big to happen before we plan, right? There's some sentiment expressed that essentially there was no reason to do it right now. Well, I think the fact that we aren't looking at big projects on our plates right now it means it's a perfect time to do this. So it's perhaps counterintuitive because it feels like we're sort of in maybe a holding pattern while inflation is so high, et cetera. But it strikes me as the perfect time to plan.
That kind of leads into like a question I have. I think it might be more for you, Drew. Just what's our overarching, I mean, I know the very general goal of this is to create a strategic plan, right? But and I know we don't want to have any preconceived ideas of what we want to come out of this, right? But do we have some ideas of what we want to come out of this? I feel like we already have a little bit of a blueprint of ideas of like, we'd like to have some differentiated housing, and we'd like to have, like, so I guess for $100,000, I'm just trying to understand what, if we have a little bit more of a specific end goal. I don't know how else to word it, except for that and maybe Barbara wants to answer.
Well, I'll try, and Mike, you can help. So the village is to have, I'll try to answer by saying the 1997 Comprehensive Land Use Plan, one of the biggest imperatives coming out of that planning exercise is that the village should immediately engage a consultant to do a study of the central business district. In that study, the village did that. It did a two-phase study and engaged Tesca to do it. It was done a year later, and that laid the foundation for Block 1, for what happened in the alley with Block 2, and it had that, it talked about the village should maybe consider having a bed and breakfast zoning, it anticipated people wanting to have tourists, like, almost like the short-term rental idea, the concept. There was lots of specific ideas that were blossomed through that community planning process that you guys need to do this now. Or there was some other examples of things like that came up, and one of them was the corridor, the 41-176 corridor, and that the village has ticked those boxes and done a lot of that work. But part of this work is assessing the community conditions and looking at the previous work, is going through that and harvesting out things that haven't been done yet, or is this a still good idea to do this? Should we be doing this? Should we be doing something else? Should we be looking at these areas? So the idea is doing a complete scan of the horizon in the community, looking at, old studies, new ideas, and coming up with a new blueprint based off that distillation process that has community, which there has been turnover in the community, right? There's new people in town that maybe have ideas or expectations about what the community looks like 10, 5, 20 years from now. And so that idea is, yes, and one of that is a bit anticipatory about the next consideration item with the Opticos agreement, the idea that, yes, the village has heard that through its strategic planning process, that the village needs to have more diversified housing. That's not in the 1997 comp plan at all. As a concept, it wasn't even being talked about. It's come up on other community planning where the residents have come in and said, you need to be looking at this. It's not even in the current comp plan. So the idea that that's been a reoccurring issue, that it's a bit, I guess, anticipatory, or trying to hedge that's going to come. But I think that now is the best time to tackle that in the context of a community process that is so engaged in asking residents what their thoughts are or ideas are, and having that backdrop and fabric interweaving in with that study about that, more drilling down that specific sub-area housing issue of diversifying housing product.
I mean, it's very much part of who we are as a community, being vibrant, continue that brand of Lake Bluff, and also work on the issues of diversified housing stock. That is, well, how do we address that? And this is not only a thing we address by itself, this is a continuum of things that we address downtown, including new sidewalks and new trees and new lights and new ways to look at our community from multiple angles, trying to move forward this community.
Yeah, I think the village has probably gotten to a bad habit of leaning on its strategic plan and not the land use plan to help dictate some zoning amendments like the ADU, right? That was something that came about the diversifying housing product. Wasn't in the comp plan. These probably should be in there. The idea, there's been things that have happened already that have been teed up and requested by residents through a separate process, which really should be coming through the land use plan.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Also, are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Barb?
I wanted to talk about something that's going to be another agenda item, but the reason I want to talk about it now is because we have before us the person who would have to understand if that other proposal that's being considered regarding the missing middle were to happen. It's kind of similar in a lot of things that need to happen along the way with a timeline that may include some, most, all of these same things. And so my thought was, well, we need to consider both in terms of volunteers serving on committees and how many ways that we engage with the community so that they're meaningful and timely. And so I don't know what it would look like should the other proposal be considered and we would move forward, but it's something that I wanted to ask you, looking at the bigger picture of all these things, how would you integrate that additional consultant? And I believe you know the Opticos proposal, you're at least familiar with the missing middle thing, so I'm not springing this on you, I'm just really wanting to understand, is this really bad timing because it's just gonna be like too much all at once? Or is that something that, you worked with Hay and Associates and you know how to, so if you could speak to that.
Sure, and we've spoken with the folks from Opticos and kind of thought through some of the ideas and have heard from Drew about it. There's kind of three phases, as I understand it, and Drew, you'll have to correct me. There's kind of a, what is this missing middle? There's kind of an education, informational aspect to it. And then there's this really kind of on-the-ground testing of these ideas, and then there's some implementation ideas. What we think would fit in really well, if you chose to pursue that, is to take that first phase, which is kind of introductory and learning and how does this work, and make that part of what I described as our due diligence, right? Because that's when we're doing our outreach. And what would be great would be to take this idea of missing middle and housing in general, and make it part of an early phase so that as we get to what is basically phase 3 up here, the vision and those goals and objectives, there's already been some discussion about that. Right, so it would be our suggestion they do that earlier on, and I think they're game for that. The idea of testing those evaluations, that's kind of more like a phase 4 thing that we've got, because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing the same kind of testing with those themes that are listed in the proposal. So it really does mesh together, and by the time we start drafting the plan and talking about implementation, those recommendations from Opticos could be incorporated there. So we think there's a really nice synergy between them if you choose to do both of them.
Okay, because I see opportunities, but I also feel like we don't want to ask 2 people to the prom at the same time, because it's going to be a little awkward, and, we want everybody to be able to dance when they need to dance, and, bad analogy, but, I just want to broach that because we're thoughtfully considering that next, but we've got you, and I wanted to ask.
From our perspective, there certainly is a synergy, and it's a great way to answer the question. I mean, we talked about it when we were talking about the RPD and the question of housing and how do you do. And I think the missing middle thing is for what it's worth, in my opinion. I think it's a great way to do it because it's not a question about, it's a question about design. That's right. How do you design different types of housing, all different types of housing, so they fit into your community?
Right.
It gets called missing middle and soft density and all those kind of phrases, whatever they are. But the thing that I think is interesting and appropriate to coordinate with the plan is that it's customized.
Yeah.
It's about what works for Lake Bluff, and that's really why it does fit in well.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the most exciting opportunity we have in front of us, where we can live in a world of possibilities, where we can actually imagine what Lake Bluff could be and what we can create in the middle of our 4.5 square miles, and what is well received by the community, what is not a possibility, what is a possibility, and what it would take to get there. So I find that absolutely exciting that we consider those 2 things at the same time.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say is that we have worked with you, your company, and you personally before on other matters, and we do a lot of reading. We attend a lot of meetings, but we are a volunteer board, and your focus is on this type of issue along a broad spectrum of communities, and that perspective and that focus is super helpful to us. And I feel like you're able to distill what is very complicated and we are swimming in, and you're able to distill it and communicate it to the board members well, and to reach out to the community, because the community can come in with, I'm on this side or I'm on that side, and we have people they're good people, but they're on both sides of a number of issues. And so I have appreciated your perspective and your ability to kind of rein it in and use language that we hadn't thought of. Everyone's thinking about their side and their issues, but not thinking about language that shows commonalities and possibilities and things like that. So I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you've done in the past, and I'm very excited about you taking that knowledge of Lake Bluff specifically and kind of, again, brushing it across all the other communities and kind of saying, well, what makes us different? And you can kind of see that we're in it. We don't really even see how sometimes we're different because we're just in it. The other thing I wanted to speak to was that I do think it's, some people will say, why are you always hiring these consultants? They're so expensive, and I get it. I'm a budget girl. But I also know that because we've been so focused at bringing our staff numbers down and having our staff people wear a lot of hats, and then these fires come up and they have to deal with those fires, that you don't always have that perspective for these big, broader, long-term things that need to get done. The fires get taken care of. And so with our smaller staff, it makes sense that if we try to do it in-house and we just haven't accomplished it yet, then a consultant makes sense. So I feel like it's merited, the time is right. I feel really good that we're not just throwing some dollars at it so that we don't have to think about it. I think that this organization does a great job of helping us do our jobs and helping the community see a broader vision. So that is all I needed to say.
Thank you. Can I just say, the name Budget Girl is pretty cool. I think
That's a T-shirt, isn't it?
Being trademarked right now.
Copyright.
Thank you, Barb.
Okay.
Any other comments on the board?
I'd like to echo Barb's comments, and I think, of course, I think, and Susan said it earlier, this is a good time to do it, because it's relatively calm, and I think we can kind of get ahead of some things and get something in place that is a good blueprint going forward. So I think it's great, and I guess for me, I would hope that the word that we use as we're listening to all of our residents and their varied opinions is just compromise, and we work together to find something that works for everyone in the village. I'm kind of a compromise person usually, and
Compromise girl.
Compromise girl. That'll be my T-shirt. And so I just hope that, no matter, because people are on all areas of the spectrum, which you already know, you work with community members all the time, but just that we listen to everyone. We try to come up with a good compromise with the plan so that people feel comfortable, they feel like they've been heard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comment? So Michael, I guess you're part of the family.
I get a T-shirt? Or?
Yeah, you gotta come up with a name.
Yes, I guess we have.
Planning guy, I guess.
So do we have any public comments online calling for participation?
So if you're participating in Zoom and would like to raise your hand so you can be recognized and offer public comment, please do so now, please. We do have somebody. Hold one moment.
Go ahead. Please state your name and your address. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Mark Stolzenberg, 16 East North. I could not but resist your invitation to speak, so I appreciate it.
Hey, Mark.
After asking twice. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you for the thoughtful discussion this evening as well. As you know, and as seems apparent from our discussion today, which was probably a longer discussion than Drew expected to have on these topics when he woke up this morning, I just wanted to raise our past history here in terms of the way that planning has occurred in this village, and the fact that we seem to be engaging consultants for almost every question that we have, whether or not we're going to string up festoon lights, and now looking at missing middle and the comprehensive plan, right? It seems that we do spend a lot of taxpayer dollars on consultants, and I hope that we're being mindful of that. Next, in terms of citizen involvement in the process, particularly with regard to the comprehensive plan, I hope that this is a transparent process. People here have a lot of views, and I think we're fortunate to live in a community that is involved, engaged, and cares about the town. At times, yeah, there may be a silent majority that doesn't always speak up, but I think by and large, when you reach out to folks and you let them know that their voices will be heard, they're going to speak up and they're going to have great ideas. And I think that's a real benefit and plus of the community we live in, and we're very lucky for that. Now, in terms of how you go about the approach, I hope that there are no preconceived notions and no outcomes that are expected before the process begins. And I'll be honest, and Drew, I'll be very blunt about this. The 2015 downtown visioning study that I think Tesca ran was bad, right? It was examples of high density development and basically asking folks, how do you want this to look? Not what do you want the character of our community to be, not what type of development would be appropriate for our community. It's how do you want it to look, right? And I hope that community involvement when we go about this process now is going to look a lot different. With regard to Opticos, and I'm just going to jump now because there's already been some discussion about it, and so I don't have to repeat myself. You know, when agenda item 24 comes up, it's interesting. You know, Opticos seems to have coined the phrase missing middle. They seem to have trademarked it, and they seem to have made a business for themselves in that, right? And they also seem to have a bit of an algorithmic approach towards zoning. I hope that our approach towards zoning, perhaps we use Opticos as suggestions, but we don't utilize an algorithmic approach in our small 4.5 square mile town of 5,700 people, right? And I trust that, and I think everyone here shares the same goal, that it's going to be a thoughtful process in determining how, if at all, our zoning code is revised and what type of development that we want for this community. We can all agree that development done right is a great thing, but it has to be development that done right that keeps our community the special place that it is. So I thank you for the time tonight. I thank you for your service. And if you're going to be buying those T-shirts, please make sure they're not with taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Mark. And
have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I want to stress in this process, and I've heard your words multiple times in the past, and I see where you stand. But I want to make sure that, again, is emphasized that there is community engagement, there's transparency, there's no preconceived notion. We're here to protect what Lake Bluff is as a community and to basically get us ideals that will move this community forward in the future. So thank you, Mark.
And may I state for the record, I have enough T-shirts to last for a very long time. I appreciate the thought and the humor, but I do not want any T-shirts.
Thanks, guys. Are there any more comments online?
I don't think that there are. Mark, can I ask you a question about that 2015 study?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess it's not I don't know if it's a question, it's more of a comment. You know, I think that is a great example of where the village, working with Tesca, presented plans on a continuum of different ideas and different concepts with no preconceived notions, right? The idea that the process yielded a very Lake Bluff output, and that it was something that we went into this with no preconceived notions. In fact, the output at the end of the process wasn't even what was they were contracted to do in the first place. It ended up being a comp plan amendment, not even a design preference study of the central business district. So I think I like to think or hold that up as a great example of where a creative design process doesn't exclude everything but the idea that it yields what Lake Bluff wants. And so I'm optimistic that will happen again, and I hope you will be involved.
I appreciate that, Drew, and I would be remiss if I didn't say I think there were a few intervening events after that 2015, after the 2015 visioning exercise.
We can't control who submits what when. So.
Fair point.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
I do not see any more questions in the room. Do we have last questions on the board? It is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Hatch? Aye. Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
And Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next item is item 25. And That would be an ordinance amending Title 8 of the Lake Bluff Municipal Code to impose a stormwater utility fee. Could I please have a motion on this item?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you very much. The village existing stormwater system has insufficient infrastructure to adequately address all of the village's drainage needs, especially as those needs increase as property owners engage in additional development and climate change increases the number and intensity of the storm events. Because the village does not have a dedicated funding source, the village maintenance and improvement of its stormwater infrastructure is often limited due to the reliance on the availability of general fund dollars that may be allocated to other projects. Following more than 2 years of study and public engagement, the Village Board of Trustees has determined it is necessary to create a stormwater utility to provide an effective and long-term approach to support stormwater management within the village, to provide an equitable, efficient, certain and neutral revenue stream for the construction, maintenance, operation, and improvement of a stormwater system. As designed, the stormwater utility fee imposed upon each property within the village will be calculated based upon the extent each property utilizes the stormwater system. In response to the public comments received to date and direction provided at the March 1st, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting, the ordinance reflects a more robust credit from 50% to 75% possible reduction in fees for properties that do not drain into the village stormwater infrastructure, and a limit on the frequency of utility fee increases associated with this new program. More specifically, the village board will not increase the utility fee for a minimum period of 5 years. Concerns were raised regarding potential increases in the fee without limitation versus the Illinois property tax extension limit regulations, which sets max levels and certain procedures for annual increases exceeding a set threshold. On March 13, 2023, the Village Board approved first reading of the ordinance and discussed purposely delaying second reading of this ordinance effective July 1st, 2023, for a minimum of 30 days to allow time for more public comments, finalize communications plans, and to hear from local institutions and commercial businesses. Now that staff has worked with consulting engineers, Christopher Burke Engineering Ltd. to finalize ERU calculations, met with several local institutions and commercial businesses. It is recommended that the Village Board consider second reading of this ordinance. Questions on the board?
Nope.
I guess my mouth got really dry along the way. I'm sorry about that. It's like I was struggling to read that. Questions on the board?
It's ironic, really, stormwater, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
after bad pun. So after 2 years of studies, do we have more comments, questions?
I just wanted to point out that one ERU is equal to $195. So
Yeah.
the public knows that.
Yes,
So
thank
for
you.
the ERU calculation.
So if the board approves the ordinance tonight, you'll see another at the next meeting, that stormwater ERU equivalent number being added to the village's fee ordinance. So you'll see that again.
Okay. Any more questions?
In that intervening period between first and second, any additional public comment or?
There were additional meetings with business owners and other institutions. I think it's been a continuation of what we heard in the other meetings. It's that we get it, necessary evil. We understand it, and I think there was appreciation for the increase in the credit. I think that there is, importantly, I know that President Charlot and I and Village Engineer Hansen had met with state officials recently. I don't know if you want to update the board on that. It was included in the Friday information report, the letter, Senator Morrison's support of the village's initiatives, and that you had a subsequent conversation with Representative Morgan today.
Correct. So first, the thing we should mention is we met with Park District Board, and of course, it's not a great news that you might have to pay $25,000. That is probably not in your financial plan, but the point is, to Drew's point, this is a necessary evil. It really benefits the community, and people are happy to participate in that improvement of the community, and that's one thing. So we continued our plan, and our plan was to reach out to public officials and to reach out also to IDOT for funding. And the reception from IDOT was less than enthusiastic. And on that call was State Senator Jenny Morrison, who also expressed dismay after this call, and we are grateful to Senator Morrison for supporting our plea. And Senator Morrison sent a very stern, strongly worded communication to state officials, supporting our need. It's past due. We cannot have 14 feet of water supporting, cutting in our community in half. The last event was actually 2 days before Senator Morrison visited us, where during that afternoon we were wondering how kids were going to going back home. Okay, it's not acceptable, simply enough. We also reached out to Representative Bob Morgan, who is also now supporting us, and who will also address communication to state official for our plea to IDOT for funding for this event.
That's part of the revenue plan, to close that gap, to get the state to step up and support their own assets.
Fantastic.
Right. Any more on this item? It is a roll call.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
And Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next item is item number 24. And that would be a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Opticos Design for the comprehensive land use plan update, optional task for housing diversity and missing middle housing. And that again is a extremely exciting item that builds into our plan for looking at our community in the future. So could I please have a motion on this item?
So moved.
Second.
Late last year, the village initiated a procurement process to retain a planning consultant to update the village's existing 1997 comprehensive plan, as amended, with a new document and framework that guides future development and land use decisions for the village of Lake Bluff for the next 20 years. As noted in the call for proposals, the new plan is anticipated to provide an overarching framework and prioritize elements from the numerous sub-area and topical plans created by the village since the 1997 comprehensive plan. 4 proposals were submitted by the January deadline, plus one alternative non-conforming proposal, and a consultant selection team was assembled, which included PCZBA Chair Gary Peter, PCZBA member Ann Zoranzan, BAC member and local architect developer Rob Douglas, School District 65 board member and historical preservation architect Tim Penish, Assistant Village Attorney Ben Schuster, Assistant Intern Eric Mueller, and Village Administrator Drew Irvin. After evaluating the proposals and interviewing the top 3 firms, it was again the consensus of a team that Opticos Design Inc. presented a unique opportunity to address long-standing village strategic objectives to encourage diverse housing implementation for residents in all stages of life and engage the entire community in village leadership examination of it takes to enjoy a variety of quality housing options in the context of Lake Bluff's history, housing legacy, and the marketplace. The team agreed that Optico's housing diversity expertise could augment the larger comprehensive plan update within TESCA's robustly planned community engagement process. The attached agreement, engagement not to exceed $55,000, provides for the optional scope tasks that includes a review of a village zoning code, evaluation of 2 specific possible redevelopment sites, and refinement to the comprehensive plan with a focus on the multifamily district R5 and the central business district. It is recommended that the general fund contingency monies be utilized for this effort. Board?
Unfortunately, Opticos couldn't be here tonight. I hope that they could. They are in another state, in another city, presenting. But I think this is an opportunity, and as the memo says, this is a unique opportunity for the village to engage a consultant that can help the village really speak to a long-standing community concern. And I don't know another firm that could do it in this manner. And so I think this is a rare opportunity that the village should strongly consider.
And from my standpoint, it really speaks about the issues we have been presenting. For me, being involved in this board for at least 5 years, to really talk about what we could be as a community and what the empty space could become for this community. Again, satisfying the kind of request we have had, that is, what will I do when I want to downsize? What should we do with the parts of Lake Bluff that should be diverse, simply enough, from a housing standpoint? So it's very exciting.
Drew, I'm assuming because this company's out of California and they're just starting to do some work here in Chicago, that we're giving them all kinds of background materials on Lake Bluff and our history and what we're all about and what have you, so they have a starting point? They have
Yes, so yes, they are just starting. They've been a little over a year having an office in Chicago. They're adding staff there. They're growing. They have a very large West Coast presence. They will do the deep dive to understand the village's history. This is the same firm that was part of the statewide initiative of missing middle housing. That competition at the village was one of the sites. So Opticos and Jennifer Settle in particular was involved in that process. That's where I got to meet her years ago. Okay. So she is familiar, and she was part of that, even the Block 1 site that the village owns. She has firsthand knowledge of that and reviewed actually specific designs for that site. So she has a good understanding of the village and specifically the CBD and R5 districts of the village already. So you can hit the ground running.
Awesome. I happened to notice too on their website yesterday that the owner or the principal, Dan Paralak, he's speaking at University of Chicago on May 1st. So maybe we could talk to him. Or he could make a detour up here if he has a little time. I just happened to notice it when I was doing a little research.
Mark your calendar, Claire. We'll get the black van, we'll get the face mask. Take them.
I'll offer my thoughts. When I first read this, after I read the number 24, the TESCA, I had a little bit of sticker shock. So I think that the need, right, we have stormwater needs. I think that diversified housing or missing middle, I struggle with that term because I'm not sure what it means. It's a really big need for our community. And I originally thought, well, we kind of know what our vacant parcels are. We know what areas we want to transform. Can't we kind of muddle this together ourselves and save the $55,000? And the more that I thought about it, if you take what TESCA is going to do and you take what Opticos would be doing here, it's about $150,000. If you amortize that over 25 years, which is the last time we've done something like this, it's about a line item of about $6,000 a year. And having been around enough consulting projects like this and what TESCA is going to do, you never really know what's going to come out. And I think that that for us to be able to really articulate what we want our housing to be, and I think Michael said it right. It's like, we need to figure out what it is that fits really well with Lake Bluff. We need to identify that. We need to adjust our zoning to complement that. And because this is such a big need, I think it's a good investment on the part of the community, because we need to educate the community on what this is. Clearly the need is out there. We need to raise the awareness of that. So I'm very much in support of this.
Good words. What I have seen in the village is these plans keep resurfacing, and they're being used basically every day when I withdrew. And so for us to have the opportunity to formulate, to spend the time to engage the community, to formulate a plan under different axes for land use and what would be a missing middle, what would be the different forms of housing we could actually envision, is important. It's a large investment. Like many things that are strategic, sometimes we don't really know where we're going to go. But at the end of the day, that keeps paying off because we have thought about it, we have planned for it, we have envisioned it, we have seen possibilities, and we empower other people to come and invest in our community. And that is important.
I know that after serving, you've served 5 years, I've served 10, and I remember this being part of some of the initial discussions and conversations, and we really struggled with diversification of housing, what that looks like, what it means for Lake Bluff, people on lots of different sides. And I think this is a great avenue for trying to advance, defining what that is, not taking someone else's version of what worked in a very different place, but taking knowledge that has been gained. There are some things that are universal and some things that will be specific to the geographic and cultural area, and we're going to find out what some of those differences are and see if we feel comfortable with something that looks more like a Lake Bluff version. And I'm very excited about it. I think it's well worth that investment because we haven't been able to succeed in doing something like that yet. So.
Well said, thank you. Kat, Suzanne?
My only concern is just them tripping over one another, right? And whether we have fully maximized the synergies they might have with one another. So that's what I keep coming back to. How are they going to be able to avoid duplicating effort or duplicating interviews, effort on the part of the citizens? And then frankly, just a little bit about the cost. Are they going to be able to benefit from one another and therefore maybe there's room in their budgets for us paying less? But all that being said, I'm sure you've already thought of that. If Michael is convinced that they can work effectively together, and it sounded like he was, then it seems like this is an opportunity we need to grab hold of. To your point, amortized over 20, 25 years, it's, it's a good investment.
I think Steve said it well in that we can assume that we know things, but without actually having, the professionals in there to do the consultant work, we have no idea what it'll actually shake out to be, and I think that's really important.
Thank you for your comments. If there are no more comments, this is a roll call.
And there's no one online, so no more public comment.
So no more, thank you.
Trustee Rabbit?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Engelmann?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
And Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item following the reorder of the meeting is item number 26, and that would be an ordinance amending the special use permits for the Center Avenue Partners development to allow Half and Half Pizza to operate on the main floor at 77 East Scranton Avenue for Half and Half Pizza. Could I please have a motion for this item?
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. On March 25th, 2023, the Village of Lake Bluff received a zoning relief application from Half and Half Pizza LLC seeking an amendment to the special use permit governing the bicycle shop restaurant use within the Center Avenue Partners development at 28 to 38 East Center Avenue and 53 to 91 East Scranton Avenue. The petitioner intends to move the bike sales service component of a business into the basement. A small desk or area related to bike sales and service will likely remain on the main floor. Consequently, the main floor will primarily be used for the Half and Half Pizza restaurants. The Bank restaurant will not remain. No changes in hours of operations are expected. Like many pizza restaurants, Half and Half Pizza sees most of its sales from carry-out orders and expect that to continue with these changes. But the applicant is now requesting 48 seats for customers choosing to dine in. This is in addition to the 26 seasonal outdoor dining seats that have been utilized since 2021. At the April 19, 2023 Joint Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, the PCZBA conducted a public hearing and voted unanimously 6-0 to recommend the Village Board approve an ordinance to amend the special use permits governing Half and Half Pizza as amended in order to allow 48 seats within the bike shop restaurant. Comment on this, board.
I think it'll be great to have we have a pizza place, but we don't have a sit-down pizza place. I think that'll be nice, and my understanding is the bike shop is essentially gonna just be in the basement.
Correct.
And with appointment only, and that they got past their bathroom issue with the state. So, sounds good to me.
I think it's gonna be nice to have somewhere the kids can go and eat and sit down kind of on their own for the independence.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they keep ice cream, but
You know, I love it, but my only issue again is parking, because now we're adding 48 more seats and a sit-down area that was originally just to carry out and take, carry out and pick up. So, do we have any heartburn about parking?
I would,
Didn't say anything.
no, I was saying from the PCZBA's perspective, I think there was conversation about the parking study, the most recent update to it, and general idea that the village has granted zoning relief for these developments and redevelopments of these properties years ago, and probably the best we're going to do is to ensure that employees of those establishments are parking at the train lot and not in customer parking stalls, and there's methods to do that and procedures in place to make sure that happens, and Mr. DeRossi was agreeable to do that, and that was satisfactory to the PCZBA.
Okay.
Thank you. I think from my standpoint, having been in the village since 1996, I think the comment I've heard the most about diversity of restaurants in Lake Bluff was, I wish we had a pizza place or an Italian restaurant in the village. And I think that satisfies it. That actually is a great step toward multiple options in the village. And the second thing I want to say as a Frenchman, those pizza are awesome. I've had it several times in the last few days. Not great, but they are awesome. So I'm very happy this is going to be an option that will be available to us as a village.
First reading.
First reading. If there are no more comments on the board, this is a roll call.
First reading is voice vote.
Voice vote. Sorry about that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. The motion carries. Next item is we are resuming normal order of the meeting.
Just the first 20 items, that's.
Just the first 20 have to go.
Sorry about that.
So next item would be item 7A, that would be a warrant report, the warrant report for April 11 to April 24.
I don't know.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. and March 2023 payroll expenditures. Could I please have a motion for report, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. As a summary of background and reason for request, we are faced with expenditures of village fund for payments of invoices in the amount of $305,687.10 for April 11 to April 24th, 2023, and expenditures of village fund for payment of payroll in the amount of $306,870.95 for March 2023, for a total expenditures of $612,558.05. Questions and remarks on this report?
I hate to even ask a question because it's 9:00. I just had a quick question about the software for the Lake Bluff History Walk, and I forgot to ask you earlier, Drew. So there's an amount on there, it's like
2,500.
Is that annual, or is that for a longer
That's an annual license.
annual license? Okay. Is that,
And that's supportive of the walking tours, which
right.
the village would view as marketing and advertising.
right?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
I do not have comments on this report.
That's my only comment, I promise.
Thank you. It is a roll call.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Trustee Marquis?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is item 7B, that would be our March 2023 financial report. Do we have
Bettina's online, yes.
Bettina? Bettina, could
I'll cover it if
Okay.
you like.
would you mind covering that report?
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Obviously, I will very generally say, generally speaking, sales tax continues to come in at a high level, and revenues are exceeding expectations, and expenses are lower than expected. If there are any other specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I'm so sorry, I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
On the page that talks about our general fund revenues and expenditures, this page here,
Yes,
there's a line item in there that says North Chicago sales tax share.
yep.
Okay, there's been a kind of a big change there. Can you explain that?
So the area, there is a land area between really the sanctuary north up to, I think it's 137, on the west side of 41, that is largely industrial park, that the village of Lake Bluff and the city of North Chicago, we did a long-term agreement to guide how that property will be developed, and that the village would actually, there'd be a sales tax sharing agreement between North Chicago and the village on that. Historically, those numbers have dribbled in, and there was a time where we did not see any money coming in, and it was just a matter of there was some staff turnover at the city of North Chicago, so that number actually goes back for a couple of years.
Gotcha.
So it's more, it's not like there's all of a sudden there's a splash and everybody's buying, pipe, construction pipe or something that, it's just a catch up.
Okay, and then we'll see it level back out
Yep.
again. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Nope. It is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Next is our village administrator's report.
I do not have anything to report.
You don't sound certain about that?
That was buying time.
I am buying time.
Someone ask a question.
I've been exposed.
You can say pass.
No, nothing to report tonight. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Next is item 9, our village attorney's report.
Nothing to report.
Thank you
And
very
they're
much.
not buying time.
Next is my report.
And you have something to report.
And I do have something to report, and that would be reappointing current members of the various advisory boards. And so we were busy speaking with people, getting coffee, and meeting different types of people, different boards for different positions on the board. And that would be the appointment to Village Advisory Board for the Architectural Board of Review for Bob Hunter, Art Cottrell, Neil Dahlman, Ed Deegan, and Matt Kerouac. That would be for the Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board for Gary Peters. And that would be for the Historic Preservation Commission for Paul Bergman and Jeff McGuire. And so is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
Approve the appointments.
No, appointments,
The
yeah.
appointments, appointments.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second? You.
Voice vote.
It is a voice vote. It's a roll call, voice vote.
Voice vote.
Voice vote.
It says roll call.
It's a voice vote. It's a typo.
Just reading.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. The appointments, the motion passes. One thing I'd like to add is we have vacant seats, and this is for the community. We have one seat on the Architectural Board of Review. And again, this Board of Review is to promote and protect the public health, safety and welfare of a village, as well as protect property values. We have one seat on the Business Advisory Ad hoc Committee, and that board is all about an advisory body to the village president, board of trustees, and village administrator regarding basically business conducted in this community for people to have an opportunity to contribute to the life of the village from a business standpoint. We have one seat on the Historic Preservation Commission. Okay, again, all about preservation, protection, enhancement, rehabilitation, reconstruction, maintenance, and use of the village historic structures. We have one seat on the Police Pension Board, and that would be to administer retirement and disability fund program for sworn village police personnel. And last, we have one seat on the Sustainability and Community Enhancement Ad hoc Committee. And that is all about sustainability and community enhancement ad hoc, it's to advise the village board on certain policy matters and programs that improve the sustainability of Lake Bluff and enhance the community enhancement. And to that, I urge community residents to come forward and participate in the life of the village. Those are important positions. We cannot function without residents as a volunteer, as we do here every week, several times per week, by the way. It's important, it's cool, it's civic, it is of a participation in this is who we are as a community, so it's important. So thank you. Next is our consent agenda. And that would be item 11, acceptance of a correspondence. And please note that all correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees in the informational report on April 7 and 14, 2023. Item 12, a resolution approving the Village of Lake Bluff 2023 to 2024 official pay plan. Item 13, a resolution approving the appointment of a building commissioner and deputy building commissioners. Item 14, a second reading of an ordinance amending section 10-2C-15 of Title 10 of the Municipal Code regarding applications for variations for historical properties or features. Item 15, a second reading of an ordinance amending Article 10-2C of Title 10 of the Municipal Code regarding floor area bonuses for historical properties or features. And finally, item 16, a second reading of an ordinance amending Title 1 of the Municipal Code of the Village of Lake Bluff regarding the comprehensive fee schedule. Is there a request to remove any one of these items from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there discussions on any of these agenda items?
No.
And hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is item number 17, an ordinance amending the first year of a biennial budget of the Village of Lake Bluff for the fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2022 and ending April 30, 2023. 2023. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. To align expenses with amount noted in the first year of a multi-year budget, staff recommends following past practice to revise the first year of a fiscal year 2023 BNL budget in the amount of $919,926.60 for expenditure rollovers and adjustments. This includes the following expenses which were already authorized by the village board for amount greater than 25K, or the village administrators for amount less than 25K. And number one, fiscal year 22 rollover costs associated with the following. Path paving work authorized per resolution 2021-45 and subsequent amendment in resolution 2021-69. Scranton Avenue streetscape and paving improvements authorized per resolution 2021-44. C, Lakeland lift station improvements. D, underpass storm relief authorized by resolution 2020-40 and 2023-12. E, tree trimming services authorized by resolution 2022-47. F, Green Bay Road, West Washington pedestrian crossing improvements. And last, G, water main improvements authorized per resolution 2022-1 and 2022-12. And last, item number 2, emergent repairs related to the sanitary sewer improvements authorized by resolution 2022-23, if that list makes sense. All projects with rollover costs were budgeted in fiscal year 22 with delays and or supply chain difficulties resulting in rollover cost in fiscal year 2023. Funds are available to effectuate these expense modifications from sources other than the tax levy.
And one last thing, just to note that this item should occur and be part of this current fiscal year, so staff would ask that the village board consider waiving of second reading. But again, you've already considered these things, so it's really just paperwork catch up, so. So the first reading is on voice vote.
Are there any questions?
Drew, are these, all of these items going to get done in 23, or will some roll over to 24?
The tree trimming services is a multi-year contract, right? So that one is a 4-year contract to begin with, so that'll go into the following years. Everything else will get done.
Green Bay Road's done, isn't it? Green Bay Road.
Yes, and it is working. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Looks great, thank you.
Done, yep.
No questions, having seen these before.
Thank you. Kat, any comment? Thank you. It is a voice vote, correct? Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, the motion carries.
So now you're looking for a motion to waive second reading.
Oh.
I move to waive second reading.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And so it's a roll call this time?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Ankman.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next item is the continuation of a public hearing concerning the Village of Lake Bluff proposed fiscal year 2024 BNL budget update. Could I please have a motion on that?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. As required by law, the village must hold a public hearing on the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 tentative BNL budget, the budget update, after which the fiscal plan may be revised and passed without any further inspection, notice, or hearing. Consistent with past practice, first hearing of a budget ordinance will follow this public hearing with second reading and adoption of a budget anticipated at April 24th Village Board meeting. Notice of his hearing was published in the Lake County News Sun on March 29th, 2023. After Village President Charlot opened the public hearing, the Finance Director presented a summary report of the budget at the board April 10th meeting. The board recommended that the public hearing be continued until the April 24th board meeting. And
Yeah, there's been no comments from the public regarding the budget or any further input from any others, and there's no staff suggested changes. So I think there's no reason why you couldn't close the public hearing with a vote to adopt the budget.
okay, so we leave, I mean, that will be affected by item 19.
By the vote, yes.
Okay, by item 19 vote.
Yes.
All right, so moving on to item 19.
You can close the public hearing.
You can just
declare the
closed,
public
yeah.
hearing
All right,
closed.
so we are declaring, I will declare this public hearing to be closed. Thank you very much. Next item is item 19,
So you're just looking for a motion to approve item 19?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. So item 19 is an ordinance adopting the biennial budget update for the Village of Lake Bluff for the fiscal years commencing May 1st, 2023 and ending April 30, 2024.
Again, no changes since the last time this was presented.
I have read this report, and I would encourage residents to read that report, as it is a fascinating financial history of Lake Bluff. And I mean that. This is absolutely fascinating. And so, and I can also recognize the amount of work that was done in this report by board members and by the staff. And it's fascinating reading to me. All right.
We believe you.
No, it's true.
A little light reading.
Yeah.
So, the tentative BNL budget for this year includes $17,626,295 plus $2,242,654 in inter-fund transfers for fiscal year 2024. These sums include the Village of Lake Bluff funds and the Lake Bluff Public Library funds. The village utilizes a multi-year budget process as it emphasizes long-range planning, budgeting for results, effective program management, and fiscal responsibility. Specifically, the primary objectives of these budgets are to 1, maintain current fund balances at or above village minimum reserve levels. 2, control operational costs. 3, continue reinvestment in village infrastructure. And 4, continue to deliver quality and efficient services. Additionally, this budget has been assembled with the intention to allocate resources consistent with the 2023 Village Strategic Plan. And that would be revenues. Property taxes and sale taxes continue to be the two largest sources of revenue at $4.68 million and $3.26 million, respectively, in fiscal year 2024. Sales tax revenue projections are conservatively estimated as they return to pre-COVID trajectories. The fiscal year 2023 to 2024 BNL budget continues to fully reinstate contributions to $380,000 to the Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund and an additional $500,000 to capital fund balances and expenses. That would be the operational budget, all costs except capital and contingency, for the village and the library is $13.6 million for fiscal year 2024, representing a 6.02% increase when compared to fiscal year 2023. The fiscal year 2024 operating costs have increased 4.95% from the original fiscal year 2023 to 2024 BNL budgeted expenses. One-time contract costs and personal services increase have contributed to the changes for the year. On March 13, 2023, the Village Finance Committee discussed and recommended approval of this tentative BNL budget document. A draft was available for public inspection on March 29, 2023 at the Village Hall, the Public Safety Building, and the library, as well as online at the village website at lakebluff.org. The village board approved first reading of the ordinance at its April 10th meeting. Comments? No comments online as well?
Correct.
All right. It is a roll call vote. Clerk?
Trustee Marquis.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is item 22. And that would be a resolution approving an extension of a variation at 673 Maple Avenue. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. The village board. The village board, I was worried for a second. So the village board approved ordinance 2021-7 on March 22nd, 2021, granting a variation to Kingman Scott Douglas and Robert D. Douglas to allow them to expand and remodel their house at 673 Maple Avenue, which is non-conforming with respect to the front yard setback. This ordinance regranted a variation which had been previously granted by Ordinance 2018-14, which had expired. At the time, there was no procedure to grant an extension requiring the variation case to be reheard. Since then, an amendment to the zoning code has given the village board the ability to approve extensions by resolution. As outlined in their request, the Douglases are requesting an extension so that they can obtain a permit and begin construction. Any comment on the board?
Is there any scope change from the original?
No.
Okay.
I think literally this is the only thing holding up getting a building permit at this point. Pretty close.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
It is a roll call vote.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Trustee Marquis.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is item number 26.
No, we
do
did that.
Did that?
25?
We did 25.
27.
27.
27. And that would be our trustees' report. Thank God.
Do it again. Wait, a minute, did they jump? Hold on, let's double check.
We'd like to do 25 again.
I'd like to revisit 25.
I'm losing it. So next is our trustees' report. Do any trustee wish to speak some more tonight? Report, sorry. Thank God. Thank you very much. And followed by item 28, that would be our executive session. And I do understand there is no executive session tonight. Thank you. And that would be followed by item 29, that is the adjournment. And I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we are adjourned.
Boom.
Recording stopped.
It sounded like you were building up to an executive session.